Good morning, everyone. Jim Coston here. Thanks so much for allowing us to participate in the conference this morning. I'm going to speak and try and provide as much insight as I can over the next 8 or 10 minutes of what role a private train provider of fleet maintenance and management services, etc., plays generally, specifically the role we are playing in a project, a public-private partnership, Eau Claire to Minneapolis-St. Paul regional route that has been worked on for going on 2 decades by constituent groups, regional organizations, etc. And Scott's group, and Scott will be presenting after the break. So we got involved. I'll give you how we got involved in this. We got a call from Dave Christensen, formerly Minnesota DOT Rail, and the executive director managed by the West Central Association. And we talked on the telephone. He was coming down for, I don't know, it was a Cubs convention or something else anyway. And we met in our office for a couple hours. And he was able to provide us with all of the information that they had developed over the last 15, 16 years on moving the project forward. And critical details like the host railroad was supportive, the Union Pacific is supportive of the route. The various levels of support from the online communities, educational institutions, businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, etc. We commenced meeting with the group, with Scott and Dave and the Leadership Council in Eau Claire. We also started to meet and discuss with the Union Pacific how this would go about. The Union Pacific is as the host railroad for the former Chicago and Northwestern Railroad line that still extends from Chicago, Madison Street to St. Paul Union Depot. Very supportive, very interested. They've got a railroad there, a route that is not using its current capacity for freight, and they have been very open and very supportive of the efforts to create a new regional passenger railroad corridor on this route. They made it clear that they have certain ways that they want to go about doing business. They made it clear that they don't want to run the train. They want the group to bring in a certified private rail operator that they approve of, and we've got several there. We are undertaking a study with HDR, an engineering consultancy, to determine what route enhancements and capacity expansions have to take place between Eau Claire and St. Paul Union Depot in order to get the service started. The planned service now is for 4 round trips a day, utilizing 1 set of equipment. Operating the trains is reversible trains with locomotives, with a locomotive at each end. So we are preparing for our efforts. We're preparing to go forward starting probably next week with HDR and get the study started. Before we do that, we are going to have with the Leadership Council and Scott up in Eau Claire to finalize at least our initial arrangements in terms of assembling a first time, if you will, public-private partnership at P3 here to operate and manage the route. We're going to establish at least 1 new entity to actually be the managing entity of the new route. We will site it in Eau Claire. Our company, Corridor Rail Development, has committed to sponsoring the HDR study, which is several $100,000, and then Leadership Council, and the other constituency groups we've asked to contribute to a matching fund for us to establish a working office for the project in downtown Eau Claire, and to use those monies to be able to operate it and have a presence in the community from, if you will, day one, to get things started. On the fleet side, because the group wants to be able to develop and control its own fleet, what we're going to do is take 5 of our double-decker bi-level railroad cars, the high-level cars, and move them to our sister company, Railplan International in Baltimore, where we are going to utilize adjacent CSX land there to develop a prototype center. We're actually going to build these cars. We're going to tube them out in Indiana before we ship them out to Baltimore. Tubing out meaning just take them down to metal and studs and trucks, and then send them out. Railplan and its designers and engineers will complete the design engineer for the build out. They've done most of that work already. We'll be working with the actual customers, in this case the project, to be able to facilitate the kind of changes we want for the train and how it's to be built out and configured. That gives rise to an interesting and kind of unique situation now, because we're going to be building out interior configurations of railroad cars, mindful of the fact that we need to address social distancing as an issue. That's a good thing about when you're building railroad cars, because you really start with a clean sheet of paper, and we've already been working with the designers at Railplan in order to create some new type of seating configurations, not just 2 and 2 seating, family seating, group seating, more private accommodations, which are clearly a very saleable commodity and will be for some time to come, we think, going forward. So what we're going to do is take the 5 high-level cars that we send out there, and what Railplan is going to do is what they have done in a number of other new car railroad builds from foreign manufacturers with plants in the U.S., except we're going to take it to them. What Railplan usually does is go to Alstom, go to CAF, etc., and go up and actually build out, actually assemble the first set of each type of each equipment type of the railroad cars side by side with the workers. That's what we're going to do. But instead of taking the Railplan engineers and designers and bringing them out to the rebuild facility in Indiana, we're actually going to bring some of the workers from Indiana out to Railplan, and they could work for several weeks on each of the cars to assemble them. It also provides a good location for us to be able to have our state, regional, and other customers, as they've asked us to be able to provide access during the entire procurement duration, so that they can have their owner's representative, usually someone from an engineering consultancy, on the shop floor, just like Caltrans had when they build out their fleets with manufacturers, just like North Carolina Department of Transportation has before as well. So it's very transparent, hands-on, and being able to take real-time comments, suggestions, etc., from the customer themselves. The prototype train is actually going to be the train set we're going to utilize for Eau Claire to Minneapolis-St. Paul service. That's because we control most aspects of this new route in terms of moving forward, and we believe that in terms of timing, we'd like to have that train set available. As I said, it's going to be a 5-car train set. As of now, we're looking at 4 coaches and a cafe lounge with business class seating as well, locomotives at each end, so we can operate trains and bi-directional and actually get 4 round trips in during the day. We anticipate that it'll take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to complete the train set. We could probably go faster. I don't think we'll need to, because the Union Pacific, once the HDR study's done, is going to mandate what kind of capital requirements are required. We've got a very good relationship with the Union Pacific. They have, from last year, they came forward to us, suggested that instead of asking the route sponsors to pay tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially, to be able to get the route prepared for service, they've suggested that they will simply charge a more market-based rate for the actual use of the slots, the actual slots to actually operate the train, so that every time a passenger train is operating, the railroad isn't experiencing a revenue shortfall because they're not operating freight trains over that. It's very groundbreaking in terms of, we've seen what the UP and others have talked about in terms of what's required to put a train on from 3 days a week to 7 days a week, a new route, etc. This is very interesting to us because, we'll end the slideshow, because the leadership group, the leadership council has from the very beginning identified the entire route, the entire Northwestern 400 route from Chicago to the Twin Cities as ultimately the ambition and the ultimate outcome that's desired for this. We've seen that. We agree with it. We've talked to the state departments of transportation. We've seen how difficult it is to get things started. Anyway, so we are also at the same time going to start the process. We don't have any train stations on this route. The last train operated, I believe, in 63 or 64. So it's a clean sheet of paper. We get to establish a new terminal for Eau Claire at all of the downline stations. The intent, and Scott can certainly talk to you about this, it will be to generate transit-oriented development so that we're not only bringing mobility to the Chippewa Valley into the Twin Cities, but that we're also creating economic development and using the train stations as economic generators for the entire region. So if anyone has any more questions, I know I bounced around here a lot, but it's just a really different kind of scenario when people have been used to waiting for Amtrak to develop new corridors, etc. We're confident this is going to be a great success. We see success. We see expansion beyond it. We see the opportunity for other train services to be coordinated in and out of the Twin Cities. Minnesota, we've been discussing for over a year now with Minnesota Department of Transportation the opportunity to create a central maintenance facility. They were going to build one anyway on the route from Minneapolis to Duluth. It's possible we could do it at Minneapolis, St. Paul, and be able to have trains from multiple routes serviced at the facility. So there's all kinds of different ways to try and keep a rein under costs, to generate publicity for the train services, etc. We have a great community with Scott and the Chamber and the Leadership Council and everyone in the Chippewa Valley. Whenever we come to town, we look forward to being able to do that again. We get greeted at the hotels and everything. Oh, this is the fellows who are bringing the trains to town. So with that, and with Scott being able to give you further updates as to where we're going, I'm open to any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Jim. I do have some questions that came in the chat box, excuse me. And the first one is from Jay in St. Paul. He said the number of riders on the TCMC is 155,000. Is that the number that would result from your equations? And then he also commented he saw the commentary letter that you had placed in the Star Tribune and thought it was very good.
Oh, very good. I'll let Fritz talk about the equations in terms of the ridership projections for TCMC.
You know, I don't know what the ridership projections are for that train. I would suggest that they're probably low because they probably do not include the exponential effect that happens when a second train is added. I don't know whether the numbers they're releasing are based on the experience we had in Illinois or the experience they had in North Carolina when they added trains. But there is a very definite exponential effect, and most of your planners, when they release these estimates of ridership, they tend to protect themselves by lowballing. But I think experience shows you get more riders than are normally disclosed by the planners.
I think Fritz, Fritz, this is Terry Brown with WisARP. I'm one of the other screens you see here. I don't know if this will help you on the fly, but the Empire Builder ridership within the state of Wisconsin has been around 100,000. That has an error of like 2%. It's been plus or minus 2% of that up until COVID, of course. And that estimate of 155,000 is an Amtrak estimate, and that's dated 2015 now. So that's an aged rider estimate. So those are numbers, those are hard numbers that I can give you.
That would be useful. I know this, that if you add that second train, and if you time it properly, it will not split the builder's ridership. It will equal the builder's. It will build its own ridership that will be equal to the builder, and it will add passengers to the builder.
Yeah, the one thing that we've certainly seen here in Illinois, as well as in other jurisdictions where train service is added, particularly when it's doubled, is that the second frequency does not cannibalize revenue and ridership from the first. In fact, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and both services within a year and a half, like we did here in Illinois, get to far greater than doubling of the existing single frequency ridership and revenue.
Thanks, Jim. I do have a question, and Frank raised his hand here. So Frank, go ahead and address your question to Corridor Rail, please.
Well, I would this applies to the Corridor Rail thing as well, but on the frequency, I think the other thing that we need to consider is that it's the interchangeability of service. People don't, there's a tendency to think that a train is a particular thing going from A to C via B, whereas in fact people want to connect with other destinations. And one of the problems that we have, I think, in Wisconsin is that Chicago Union Station is an extremely poor facility for changing trains quickly. We really need facilities where it's either cross-platform transfer or maybe even same platform transfer, where you're waiting less than 10 minutes for the connecting train. Locally, I think that we have to look towards getting the Hiawatha service actually running through Chicago Union and linking with the Illinois services and with Metra, so that you end up with multiple destinations available to you easily and understandably. A sort of, for those familiar with the RER regional services that go through Paris, you have multiple easy interchanges. And I think that again, along with frequency, is a factor which is not very well understood by transportation planners on this side of the pond.
This gentleman has brought up something terribly important, which rarely appears on the agenda of any of the advocacy organizations, certainly isn't talked of much in the media, and that is connectivity. We hear a lot of people saying, when are we going to get high-speed trains? But they rarely ask, when are we going to get high-frequency trains, and when are we going to get high-connectivity trains? Trains are a network function. They work best when they connect with other trains and with other forms of transportation, and nobody in this country is planning that. We have a variety of state DOTs who have their own programs, but what we lack to make our trains function is a giant federal passenger train infrastructure program like the one that built us our highways and built us our airports and our air traffic control system. In the absence of a very large, I mean, multi-billion-dollar, 10-year, 12-year, 15-year federal program to build out the entire passenger rail infrastructure, the entire lower 48 and probably Alaska as well, and till it can support connectivity like the Swiss have, where you have a 2-minute guaranteed connection across the platform at all major hubs. Rail will continue to punch below its weight class. And I do not hear this discussed. People will say, oh, we just need a couple more frequencies from A to B. No, we need a national system, and it has to focus on building infrastructure the way we build highways and airports. When that happens, we will get the kind of train service we actually need. Thank you.
Thanks, Fritz. In the interest of time, I do have a few other quick questions I'd like to get to, and we'll probably have to cut it off after the next 3 questions. This question came in from Yuri, and I'm assuming he's referring to the Eau Claire to St. Paul service, but I'm not sure. It says, how do you provide daily service with a single train? Don't trains need maintenance and service just like cars?
Good question. Dave Christensen, who's been involved with rail operations in Minnesota prior to getting involved on a volunteer basis and assisting to put together a great deal of the information on baseline information on the project. It's an 85-mile trip. You can run 79 miles an hour. So it's basically like a Chicago to Milwaukee type of service where you can take that single train set, and particularly if you're short turning one of the trains in the morning and going out only several stations across the river and back into Wisconsin to bring in morning commuters, if you will, then you're able to 4 round trips daily. The trains are maintained at night. Our goal is, as we're working with Minnesota DOT and Wisconsin and others on potential fleet and facilities, both providing financing for it, we have a goal of having all of the equipment that we're operating or that are being operated in these corridors in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and there's plans beyond the several that we're working on now, to be interchangeable equipment. That allows us to reduce the cost to the overall project of providing spare equipment. It allows us to substitute equipment between train routes and actual trains to address peak capacity and spikes in train travel for schools, for college days, etc. Allows us to work from a regional pool to make it available. And again, with the planned outcome, at least as of now, to have a centralized maintenance facility to cycle all those cars in on the periodic basis. You service and maintain your train set every night. You provide fuel, water, cleaning, restocking, etc. The FRA requires periodic maintenance protocols, and that's where you utilize a facility. We can service the train at its destination at Eau Claire or beyond, but the train should be going in the cars anyway, and the locomotives should be going in for, or will be going in for their federally required periodic maintenance checks, etc. At a central maintenance facility. The goal being to be able to do this with as few cars as you can and to be able to keep it efficient.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I have a couple other questions. This one came from Terry Brown, and he wanted to know if there's on-time incentives in the project with Union Pacific with the proposal.
Not yet. This is a rather novel approach that the UP has taken since we met with them last year in Omaha, which is number one, they believe generally that the level of work required to put 3 or 4 round trips on a daily basis is not, will not take an extraordinary amount of budget. This will be a function of whether the train can operate on time or not, and how we measure that, and whether there are problems being caused by the host railroad in providing that. We don't see that as happening because they run a fairly, I don't want to say scheduled railroad there, but the frac trains and the general merchandise trains that are operated out of there are pretty predictable, so that you can schedule your meets, etc. The big problem, of course, is Westminster Junction, where that's a 3 railroad and state, county, and federal problem to deal with the Union, which we've told the Union Pacific that, we know that that's something that we have to deal with as well for future frequency expansions, etc. But for the time being, we're going to find out what this HDR study tells us, and then as part of the working agreement with the Union Pacific Railroad, we can be sure that to the extent that the host railroad is responsible for any extraordinary delays, etc., that has to be accommodated for in incentive payments.
All right, I have one other question. Ron from Madison would like to know if the Eau Claire service cars will accommodate bicycles.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're going to, all of our cars, at least the bi-level cars, we're all preliminarily designed by Railplan to have bicycle storage. We're also going to take a look at, because we acquired some baggage cars out of the most recent Amtrak auction, and we're going to look at designing at least a prototype of a baggage car to be included in every consist that would include bicycle storage, ski storage, checked baggage, the potential for express service along the route to be able to carry packages, mail, etc. Put a train office in there as well. We've got some good ideas on that if it works, and particularly as we're trying to expand the space between passengers for social distancing when we're reconfiguring intercity passenger cars, it gives us more room to work with. So we like that idea. It's a fairly inexpensive way for us to extend the overall volume of room on the train. And if we can get bicycles and baggage out to a discrete car, gives us more room for more seats and more room between the seats. So yes, absolutely, it's either going to be downstairs in the baggage areas of the actual high-level coaches, or in a specially redesigned baggage car behind one of the locomotives.
All right, great. The last question I'm going to have here for Corridor Rail, this came from Jay Timmerman. It's kind of a comment. He says, I've always thought that when there was a doubling of passenger rail service, the ridership increase would be 2.5. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we saw something coming pretty close to that when the state of Illinois here in, what was it, 2007, did the doubling of service, and within a year it had gone up, not exponentially, but certainly more than 100%. So again, there's no cannibalizing for the most part when you add a frequency, if you do it intelligently, and take one train a day, which isn't a corridor, it's kind of more towards a novelty, even though it's essential, and have multi-frequencies where you're actually developing a corridor and giving people choices of when to travel. People will decide to travel, and given the right choice, they'll make a choice to travel by train.
Great. I think in the interest of time, we'll probably conclude our discussion here with Corridor Rail. Any